Hello, I am Victor Konowski and I am a counseling therapist and a coach, practicing since 2003, which makes it about 23 years now. So I've decided to share my work experiences, what I'm facing at the moment with clients in the sessions. So you can benefit as on your personal level, or if you are a counselor or a coach, you might use some of my stories and experience in your own work. So, for some reason, I have decided to record my first video after a while on the topic of addiction, and in particular, with addiction. Um, First of all, because I'm seeing that in my work a lot. Also because I believe I had it myself. I was struggling in a particular time in my life. And I was maybe not smoking too much, but I would say I was smoking about 5 or maybe 6 joints a month, which is not really much, but it still felt like an obstacle, like an addiction, something that was slowing me down. Um, so let's start with my story. I want to start with my story. And I want to share what actually helped me in overcoming this particular issue. Basically, from smoking some joints to smoking no joints. So in 2010, I was living in Amsterdam. A very interesting and very curious story. Basically, I stopped smoking in Amsterdam. That's weird by itself. Whoever's been in Amsterdam will understand what I mean. It was a particularly difficult period for me personally. Um, I moved from my town trying to settle in Amsterdam, in a brand new city for me with not so much connections. I had some friends. Um, so I felt lonely, isolated, quite difficult period, very anxious. Also, I struggled with finding the appropriate work in that period for me. And most important than anything else was I also separated from my daughter at that time, which was very young, and also my family. Up to this period, so up to uh, at about 2010, I was smoking weed for 2010. Let's say I first started smoking weed when I was living in London in 1995. So 2010 would make it 15 years. So I've been smoking on and off weed for 15 years. Yeah. And I started smoking weed out of fun, really. going to clubs, socializing, etc., etc., having fun with friends. But also, I remember when I started smoking it, it was because I thought weed will help me with my self-exploration, kind of as a tool for deepening my consciousness, um, and knowing who am I on a deeper level. But as the time was going and as I was growing, I realized, well, none of this is happening with the weed. So I'm smoking weed because of some other reasons. And this is actually quite interesting. So, in the process of letting go of the weed addiction, let's call it like that. Addiction, it's a heavy word. It sounds a little bit scary, but, and maybe I would say for the weed addiction, it's one of the lightest possible addiction that a person can have, even lighter than the addiction to alcohol, definitely lighter to the addiction of alcohol, or the addiction to diazepam or something like that. Not to mention the more heavy addictions, heroin and all other stuff. So, what actually helped me? What helped me? What healed me in this process? How did I stop not smoking? Oh, by the way, first of all, I need to tell you this was not a very fast process. This was a process that probably lasted about 12, 15, or maybe 2 years, where I really needed to explore several very, very important questions that I was asking myself. eh. And the first thing that helped me deal with it was the question why, when I start, why did I start smoking weed in the first place? So I had to go back into my memory and look and actually inquire into the reasons why I started using weed. I needed to, by inquiring, by looking into the reasons, I started to unknot, in a way, some of the major reasons why I was still using weed in 2010. Yeah. So I needed to kind of go and look into all the reasons why at the beginning, 15 years ago, I started using joints. So I realized that as I was exploring this question, I realized that, I had a lot of associations. Associations why I used weed in particular situations. Some of them were really cultural. cultural in a sense that in that period of my life in London, as we were clubbing, going out quite often, going out in clubs was often connected with some kind of dope, whether that was ecstasy, whether that was coke, whether that was weed. My choice in that period was really weed. So every time I would go to a club, I don't remember going in a club without weed. Eh? Either I would smoke it before the party or I would somehow sneak it and smoke it inside. It doesn't really matter. I was always, so to say, stoned in a club. And everybody who has tried weed and clubbing, dancing, would know that, well, basically, it's not a bad combination. Hmm? I'm not advertising, by the way. I'm just mentioning. Eh? Um, so it was a part of the culture at that period in London, where literally, clubbing, good music, socializing was going together with the weed. So for me, the association was music, clubs, socializing, and weed go together. And it's really very, very interesting. The moment I start looking into this, I realize, wow, how interesting that is. And then another question, kind of, as I was inquiring deeper and deeper, another a logical question appeared, which is, well, can you have a good time and listen to music without weed? Which was a great question. And I really needed to sit with that question. Can I actually do that? And apparently, I was also able to have good time, fun. It wasn't easy, I must admit, you know, the first several times, but eventually I tried and I realized, wow, I actually program myself in a very weird way that every time I go in a club and listen to music, I need to roll something. So that was an interesting realization for me at the time. Another very, very useful thing was the substance addiction itself. Yeah? What do I mean by this? I need to explain this. Yeah? I needed to, and I was asking myself also the questions, well, who showed me a similar behaviors in my life? Yeah? A behavior, and what I mean by similar behavior is in order to feel good, you need to take something. All right? That's the addiction. In order to feel good, I need to take something. Yeah? You remember what I was telling you about the clubbing? Yeah? In order to have fun, I need to take something. But this goes even deeper. In order to feel healthy and good, I needed to take something. So I needed to look into this belief, but also behavior that was following this belief. And this was actually a very, very, very good and very deep and super important for me personally. Yeah? Don't forget. while I'm actually recording this, maybe some of my experience will be helpful to you. All right. So when I was looking into this question, I realized there's so much there. First, and this was very big and important, was as a child, I had a medical condition, a diagnosis, which is called petit mal, which is a small form of epilepsy. It's not like the big epilepsy where you fall on the street and you have tremors on the street or something like that. It's the minor form which the tremors happen in the body. So that was my condition when I was 10. And as a result of that, and this is a topic that I can dedicate a full video on. But because of this condition, in order to heal it, the psychiatrist prescribed me 5 tablets a day. All right. So between the age of 10 and 18, I was taking 5 tablets every day to be healthy. So if we go a few steps back, you remember what I said. In order for me to feel healthy and good, I need to take something. There was such a huge revelation for me to see. And it was a total belief, very powerful and strong. And I needed to see it so I can dismantle it. Huh? Because I also needed to question, well, is that belief true for me right now? In order to feel healthy and good, do I need to take something? And that something was the joint. 15 years since 1995 all the way to 2010. Hmm? Because back in the days when I was 10 years old child, I needed to take 5 tablets a day in order for me to feel good or healthy. Hmm? There was another association for me. Me feeling healthy and good, I need to take something. I just substituted the 5 tablets with the weed later on in my life. Dismantling these associations was super powerful and helpful in the process of me letting go of this attachment, this need to have weed in order to feel better. But it wasn't the only thing. It was one of the things. The second thing, and as I'm mentioning, as I'm bringing the second thing that helped me deal with my addiction, I'm actually realizing that maybe this second thing it's even more important than the first one. The inquiry in the questions when and why I started smoking weed. And the second thing was the practice of mindfulness, a meditative practice of being present with what is happening right now in my body, here and now. I don't think I would be able to win the battle with this, with addiction, without a continuous, constant, daily practice of presence. Presence as a derivative of the meditation. When you meditate, everybody who has tried meditating know what I mean. Being present in the now. That's why we, by the way, meditate. Probably you can find in my videos a particular video where I'm talking about this practice. I might also attach a link. But the interesting thing about meditation and weed, they don't go together. It's not really doable to smoke weed and to try to meditate. It's for me, it's basically, it's I don't think it's possible at all. It's not possible actually. Yeah. Even if you try to meditate the day after you smoke weed, it will be quite hard and difficult. Yeah? Because the weed, especially the new forms, the skunk and more powerful derivatives or types of grass, they really are very, very strong stimulants to the mind, especially to the head chakra. So what was happening in 2010? I joined a group, a contemporary spiritual group, where we practice. One of the key practice was the practice of mindfulness, meditation, being present. And I realized that if I smoked a joint, the next day the meditation wasn't happening, or it was very, very hard, because the weed, it's almost like a knife into the brain. When it comes to meditation, that chakra, the head chakra, it's totally disturbed, taken off the balance, and you cannot stay focused properly or adequately or enough, whatever you want to say. So weed and meditation, I have a little Buddha here, it's not working. All right. When I realized that, and by the way, this spiritual group was very important to me. I'm still member of it after 17 years now. Is it 17? Or is it? Yeah, 17 years. 2010, 2026, 17 years. So I just realized that my relationship with mindfulness, with this contemporary spiritual group, it's actually a lengthier relationship that I had with wit, which is very nice. To acknowledge that, by the way. So I realize, well, this is important. Meditation is important to me, but I cannot meditate after smoking weed. So what I did was actually very, very powerful as an exercise. At the time, it now when I'm reflecting, it feels like I at that moment I truly outsmarted my need for weed. A little bit of a rhyme there with this particular exercise. So what I did, I said, all right. So I took up A4 paper, I divided it into half, and on one side I put pros and cons of me smoking weed and where I will be in my life if I continue smoking weed and if I stop and if I stop smoking weed and continue with my meditation. This was the side. And I start putting things. If I continue smoking weed, what will happen in my life? Eh? Where am I going to be 6 months from now? I knew that weed didn't do much apart from having good time and relaxation, good time in the clubs and socialize occasionally with friends, and relax my body sometimes when I was too stressed. Overall, the results were not something to cheer about. eh. And I started writing, where am I going to be if I continue? eh? First, short term, and the things that I wrote on that list as I was doing that actually were a little bit worrisome. eh. Some of them even scared me, especially when I continued downwards on the list and ask myself, well, where I'm gonna be if I continue smoking weed in 3 to 5 years. There was a shocking revelation living in Amsterdam. And, you know, I realized many people are buying weed in Amsterdam. Everybody knows that. It's no secret. Or you could see young couples, you could see old people, intellectuals, professionals, etc., etc. The people who were hanging in the coffee shops, especially in the nights, or maybe that was my perception at that time, it was that there are single men who mostly look like they had some personal issue or not very well dressed. Some of them had mental illness. I repeat, no, that many other people shop in the coffee shops. But what I noticed were the people who were hanging more after they purchased the weed. eh. And that get me scared because I didn't want to end up like those people with some mental illness. And I was on a very good trajectory. If I didn't change that to actually, I think that was Amsterdam was a breaking point for me. I would say crossroad rather than a breaking point. So that was the cons list. And I also asked myself, well, where I'm going to be 10 years from now. And that was also not very pleasant. eh? Because in 2010, I was literally broke, eh, and single and couldn't find the job that I wanted to. And I had anxieties and I had depression still. So it was quite difficult and scary place. And then, opposite to that, it was the pros list. The pros of stopping with and hanging with the meditation. What I knew and I was certain of after every meditation, normally I would meditate in the mornings for 10 to 15 minutes. Later on, I increased it to 20. I felt more in touch with myself, my emotions. I didn't need to run away from them. I could sit with my difficult emotions. So it wasn't, meditation was not a silver bullet, but it was much more manageable for me to exist in life and operate in life. So that was at the top of the list. Yeah? I knew that little small change made a huge difference. And when that was compiled, or if I compiled all that, yeah, where I would be 6 months from then. And then I asked the same question, what's going to happen if I don't do this, smoke weed, but if I stick with meditation and other practices that I was practicing in this contemporary spiritual group, and I realized that my life actually has a very, very big chance or chances to be much more solid, let's call it even better, improved, rather than doing what I knew, smoking weed, for the past 15 years. In that moment, when I summarize these two columns, pros, or rather pros is here and cons, I realized that I need to stick with this. And that was the moment of me making a decision, which is something super important and powerful when it comes to spiritual practices. Making a decision, but this it's probably for another lengthier video. So I made the decision that I'm going to stick with this one. And thanks God, I actually did that. I remember I left Amsterdam the following year and then I moved back to London. But I remember about 2016 or 17 or actually something like, yeah, that's the period. 7, 8, 9 years ago, there was a moment that I would wake up or just be during the day and I felt I'm healthier mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and physically than I've ever been in my life. So that was the result of that decision. So if you remember what I was saying, there are actually three things that I'm sharing here. The first one, three things I'm sharing of what helped me to win the battle with my addiction. So the first was questioning, why am I smoking? When did I start smoking? Who showed me these behaviors? By the way, I didn't say much about that. Who showed me these behaviors? But in my family, both my mom and my grandmother, they were frequent users of some kind of tablets. You remember that connection? In order to feel good, I need to take something. And now, so that was the first thing. The second thing was mindfulness. And the third thing that helped me was the capacity to sit with difficult emotions. Now, I must stress that this third thing, the capacity to sit with difficult emotions, was greatly helpful with the second thing, which was the capacity to be present. Eh? Because, so this is imagine this is a cup or a container. Eh? And if this container, it doesn't exist or it's shaky, yeah, you can't really sit with difficult emotions. The container is the psyche, the body. If you can't sit with anxiety, with sadness, with not knowing, with depressiveness, with anger, if you do not have that capacity to be present with those difficult things, emotions, you cannot sit with them. It's very, very difficult. So, what happens? You are constantly identified with all those emotions. They are who you are. You are. I was my anxiety. I was my depression. I was my tiredness. I was my sadness. But presence allowed me to sit with all those difficult emotions and disidentify. Disidentify means not to be consumed or affected by those difficult emotions. So that's the third thing that helped me to deal with my anxiety, because most of the time I also smoked because I was tired, because I was sad, because I was anxious, because I was depressed, and I needed something to escape those feelings. The weed gave me that for 15 years. But after the weed ended, they would come again and again and again. Yeah? With the meditation, with the capacity to stay present and sit with those difficulties and allow them, it was much, much easier, much more manageable for me. I didn't need to run away and go to the weed or to the alcohol. I must say, I haven't worked with people who have heroin addiction, but I've worked with people who have weed addiction and alcohol addiction or sex addiction. And there are similarities in my practice as a counselor, as a therapist, between all these addictions. So, to summarize what I was saying, healing and Recording this video, it's for purposes that you benefit from my experience. You learn something useful for you. Maybe if you're struggling with anxiety, or maybe you have, a minor addiction, or you're smoking weed, but you are not realizing that you're not going anywhere and you want to change something. These are the three things that help me. And I'm actually using those practices that I shared with you in the work with clients, and I can see how they are benefiting. So let's just summarize. What are those three things? Yeah. One, inquire into, why am I smoking weed? What am I associating smoking weed with? Am I smoking because, oh, I need some relaxation? I need some fun? Am I smoking because I want to forget something? Who showed me this type of behavior rather? Is it cultural? Did somebody in my family show me this? Huh? Where did I pick up these behaviors, these beliefs, these associations? That's number one. Number two, it's practice of meditation, mindfulness, or being present, as we call it. Huh? The capacity to stay in the now, here, with what's happening with you, with your, with your emotions. Excuse me. And number three, once you do start practicing meditation, mindfulness, start sitting and allowing your difficult emotions, whatever they are, and also being curious and question, why am I feeling like this? That's also a story for a brand new video. So I really hope that this video can help you and it's useful to you, both as somebody who wants to overcome some of these challenges, but also if you are a counselor or a therapist, it might be useful for you in your own work and your own practice. I will appreciate if you share your experiences in the comments down below. You can also ask me questions. Um, I will tend to respond to those. And I also believe and I hope that I will be recording more and more videos and sharing my experiences and my practice and also in my life, so you can benefit, or rather your mental health and well-being has some benefit from me sharing these videos. Wishing you all the best, and I will see you next time. Have a good night. Bye bye.